The basketball transfer portal is open. Who is likely to return for Missouri? Let's try to figure it out. Right now, I'm Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And you know what, with the whirlwind of NCAA tournament opening weekend, the Tigers getting upset by Drake, well, I never really had an opportunity to talk about Kellie Harper, the next Missouri women's basketball coach, so I'll have my extended thoughts on her later in the program. But you know what? First, I want to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And you know what? Let's start, though, of course, with the basketball transfer portal, which, oddly enough, yes, is open today. No, not after the championship game. That would make some sense, wouldn't it? But no, after the second round has concluded. Yep, let's do this free-for-all right now. Why not? Just like in college football, they do it in the middle of the college football playoff. Sure, let's do this during March Madness as well. Makes a ton of sense. But specific to Missouri, obviously the Tigers are going to be, as basically every major college program is going to be, outside of, I suppose, Dabo Swinney and his Clemson football squad. But basically every other major program is going to be players in the transfer portal. But at this moment, I think the most important question, if you're a Missouri fan, is who's coming back? And right now there has been, I should say, some disagreement between Power Mizzou and Mizzou Today on who is going to come back here at Missouri. Well, Mizzou Today has been speculating that a couple of the Missouri freshmen have been unhappy with their roles with the team and may well be on their way out. But Power Mizzou, a much more optimistic tone, and, well, without giving away too much, I'll just say I hope everyone is going to come back who is on this Missouri roster. And by the way, Jacob Cruz, I don't know if I've gotten to this on the program, speaking of all the stuff I've had to get to lately, but under, as I call it, the Diego Pavia rule, where junior college players, now their eligibility does not count, those junior college years do not count against their Division I NCAA eligibility clock. Well, that means Jacob Cruz can come back next season, and he has announced he is going to do just that. So there's an important piece coming back. And while Cruz was definitely up and down, I would say, I think Cruz, if he were to go, oh yeah, see you later, Jacob, that type of thing as a Missouri fan, I'm just going to tell you, you'd be dying for a 6'9" type of guy who was a 40% shooter the previous season from three, as Cruz was his previous stop at Tennessee Martin. So I think, actually, I'm more optimistic with Cruz year two with Dennis Gates. I think this is kind of a no-brainer to bring him back, long story short. But there's some other no-brainers that I've got to assume are going to return as well. And this is, nobody is really disagreeing with me out here, by the way. This is not exactly breaking new ground, but Mark Mitchell, Anthony Robinson, it would be a shock if either one of them left. I think Trent Pierce, safe to say, he'll be back as well. Aiden Shaw is another question, I would say. At this moment, I'm betting on, if you took any of these guys individually, I'd bet on any of them coming back, including Aiden Shaw. Shaw is the one guy. He's now been at Missouri for 2 seasons, right? He is just a sophomore. Am I correct there? Regardless, the point here is that Shaw has never totally found a permanent role on this Missouri basketball team. So we'll just have to see what happens here. I think at this moment he's likely to come back as well. Now, the 5 guys who are maybe the most interesting, those 5 Missouri freshmen. Of course, again, speculation that maybe not everybody is happy there. And if that were the case, understandably so, as a season ticket holder, a team who's watched this team in person, I haven't seen a lot of signs of that, I will say. For example, You see Peyton Marshall, who obviously his minutes, like all these freshmen, have fluctuated a lot, and he's gotten a lot of DNP coaches' decisions as well. But when Marshall leads the team out of the tunnel every single time at Mizzou Arena, he's yelling, screaming, and got a big old smile on his face. So I would suspect that, really, if I got to bet, again, I'm going to bet on all of these guys individually to come back. So if we're talking Jacob Cruz, Mark Mitchell, Anthony Robinson, Trent Pierce, Aiden Shaw, Honor Boateng, T.O. Barrett, Peyton Marshall, Marcus Allen, and Trent Burns, who, by the way, did not play at all last season. He's obviously going to be a redshirt freshman next season, so technically not part of the same class, at least when they run out of eligibility there. But now you're sitting at 10 guys. Plus there's 2 incoming freshmen, Columbia's Aaron Rowe and also Nicholas Randall as well. Quite honestly, after what we saw with this past class, especially Honor Boateng being a good example, I see very, very little chance that either Aaron Rowe nor Nicholas Randall is going to play this year. I just don't really see either one of them setting any kind of significant role whatsoever. But you're still talking about 12 guys there. So you could get, depending on your roster math there, how many of those guys are walk-ons in theory. The scholarship math is a little bit fuzzy here, but you're talking 3 to 4 guys probably available for Missouri in the transfer portal at least. So here's what you have, in my opinion. What you have is obviously Mark Mitchell, an all-SEC, I think, capable player. I don't know that he's consistently there just yet, but I think he's capable of being that type of guy. Also, I think Mitchell is a guy who needs some support around him, especially some shooting around him, spacing, to make him the best player he can possibly be. I think you're pretty solid at point guard. Anthony Robinson, I think, should be even better as a junior, of course. And, T.O. Barrett has shown some stuff in some tough situations. The NCAA tournament most recently at Florida, I thought he was a real defensive plus against Michael Clayton and a game that Missouri stole on the road. So then the real question is, what do you have in that freshman class? What will, of course, be a sophomore class this next season. What do you have in Peyton Marshall? Is Honor Boateng really going to be an excellent wing that we all thought coming out of high school? What position does Marcus Allen play, for example? We obviously haven't seen anything from Trent Burns yet. So those are just a whole bunch of question marks, but a whole bunch of guys that I still have a lot of faith in, at least in their potential. Marshall being one of them, Boateng the other, and Allen as well, for sure. Now, here's what Missouri needs, I would say. I just broke down what they have. Obviously, Mark Mitchell, some solid point guards is a good start, but then you definitely need a rim protector. Because with Josh Gray gone, when he was out of the game, especially since Aiden Shaw didn't play a lot of minutes, I just don't think you can count on a Trent Burns, Aiden Shaw, Peyton Marshall combination at the moment to anchor your interior defense. Maybe Peyton Marshall will get there next season. Maybe Trent Burns will get there next season. Maybe Aiden Shaw's offense will improve to the point that he's easier to keep on the floor next season. I'm just not sure if I'm Dennis Gates and I have a bunch of NIL money in the coffers that I'm willing to bet on any of those things happening next season. Best case scenario, of course I want somebody who can score inside, but to me, I need somebody who can protect the rim defensively. Also, since we're losing Caleb Grill and Tamar Bates, I mentioned how Mark Mitchell needs some spacing around him. Well, you got to have some shooting too. I think that's a pretty obvious conclusion in the portal. Also, a defensive stopper on the perimeter. If the guy can shoot and play defense, well, obviously he's going to be one of the most coveted players in the transfer portal. But if you're Missouri, you're one of the biggest players in the portal as well. So if Missouri can maybe find a shooter and a stopper, or my goodness, if they can find 2 guys who can do both, now all of a sudden you're looking at a huge turnaround possibly on the defensive perimeter next season, because Anthony Robinson, for example, T.O. Barrett as well, while Robinson in particular has been really foul prone, both of those guys could be real anchors at the point of attack. Both have shown really high upside defensively. Again, shooting, rim protection. I think Missouri's perimeter defense was obviously really lacking toward the end of the season. Look for some defense there. Beyond that, I think it's mostly just best player available, though, because, again, you've got that what's going to be a sophomore class here with a wide variety of skills. I'm just not sure which part of that I'm willing to count on the most. So a lot of questions for Missouri, but a lot of potential and a lot of options, too. And under the traditional 4-year, 1-year sit-out transfer rule in college basketball, as a freshman, you're expected to sit there and learn, maybe sit on the bench for most of the season. But under this new system, is it time to maybe let the old ways die? Plus, let's talk about my Kellie Harper take coming up here in just a little bit. But you know what? We're all about stats here at Locked On Mizzou because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4, the numbers are on an MVP level. We're talking towing up to 8,500 pounds, powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine with room for up to 8 people, whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to Mizzou Arena. The Armada Pro-4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro-4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. And you know what? If daylight savings time has snuck up on you, well, you might need some 5-hour energy. And if you're staying up late for the NCAA tournament, by the way, same deal. A refreshing pick-me-up wherever you need it. Extra daylight means extra activities, by the way, as well, and on-the-go convenience. Whether I'm at the game or traveling, 5-hour energy is easy to grab, and it keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find more than 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. So while it's quite possible that Aaron Rowe and Nicholas Randall, the two members of this upcoming true freshman basketball class from Missouri, end up being great players for the Tigers, but for this upcoming 25-26 season, I just don't see an obvious path to playing time for either one of them, especially in light of what happened this past season for Missouri and its ballyhooed a true freshman class. None of those guys ended up getting a significant playing time for any significant, consistent stretch of time. Let's put it that way. So here's the point. And again, I'm not saying Peyton Marshall and Barrett and Boateng, any of those guys, they still have time to be great players here at Missouri. It may even happen as soon as this upcoming season. But I have to say, with all of that being said, in a world where there is a 1-year transfer portal rule, essentially free agency every year, if I'm Peyton Marshall, for example, would I have been better off playing at the mid-major level this season before transferring to Missouri in this season as a sophomore or wherever, for example? Like, this is, I'm not necessarily saying that, well, maybe I am saying it. Maybe Missouri should have a Springfield Redbirds or an Omaha Storm Chasers, an actual minor league system, if you will. I don't know exactly how that would work out. But really what I'm saying is from the player's perspective. If I'm literally Peyton Marshall, if I'm putting myself in his shoes, I'm a young, big guy who obviously every big guy, 18-year-old of any position, but I think especially your post players, your taller guys need some development, some polishing. Is it maybe better for a kid like Peyton Marshall or Honor Boateng, for that matter, to have played a year at Missouri State, for example, or wherever, or Pepperdine, or anywhere. It maybe still Division I basketball, of course. I'm not necessarily saying they go to Coffeyville Junior College like Sheldon Richardson did back in the day, and lots of other Mizzou football players whose maybe grades weren't quite up to snuff. I'm saying there is a path there. I think even if you're a pretty big-time prospect, like Honor Boateng was, a definite top 50 type of player. Most of these guys in the Missouri class were at least top 100 to top 75 type of players. Hey, those are really good players that end up going to high major schools. But what about that freshman year, though? It just seems like unless you're an absolute sure thing to be a part of the starting five or at the very least the top 7 or 8 rotation, I don't know, is this kind of a lost year for Peyton Marshall? Now, I think what Missouri would say is they want to have, number one, their nutrition guys, their strength guys, their conditioning guys. They want to be working with Peyton Marshall for that entire season. And I'm sure their assistant coaches would say, no, we're working with him all the time on all these different skill sets, and especially to the point of the strength coach, the conditioning department, the nutrition department, all that stuff. Well, obviously that's worked with Marshall in particular. So that's been a big plus. I just wonder if maybe there's also value. I think there is. I think there obviously is value in him actually getting real playing time in real Division I basketball as well. The question is which part of the trade-off is worth it? Obviously, if you're Missouri, you're not going to let Peyton Marshall go to another school knowing that, well, there's nothing actually tying him back to Missouri. It's not as though, again, we don't have a literal Memphis Redbirds situation where obviously Missouri would be the St. Louis Cardinals in this analogy. There's a direct relationship there. You can call them up from your minor league system wherever you want. I'm simply saying from the player's perspective, is this something to think about? I think it's at least worth exploring if you're a guy like Peyton Marshall, somebody who is a good prospect, somebody who's a surefire high major type of player, but for one season, maybe take a slight detour and play in at least quadruple A, if you will, before you actually get to the show. And after Missouri hired former Tennessee coach Kellie Harper to be their next women's basketball coach, well, a couple of camps have already emerged, more or less. Basically, one camp says on the negative side, well, if Kellie Harper couldn't get it done at a classic power like Tennessee in women's basketball, well, then what chance does she have to succeed at a place that's never really been great at women's basketball or even really committed to it in any serious way, like Missouri? And then on the other hand, there's people who are saying, well, heck, what she did at Tennessee, if she could even do pretty much anything remotely approaching that at Missouri, well, heck, people would practically build her a statue at Missouri at this point. Well, you know what? I'm going to actually, as I often do, stake out a third territory as the pioneer that I am. Coming up here on the program in just a second. But first, let's talk about Game Time, because when you're looking for last-minute tickets, it shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game Time picks curation that makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Super deals, the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Kellie Harper, by the way, a 3-time NCAA champion as a player. Thank you very much, Shamiqua Holdsclaw. But just to give you an idea of how tough Kellie Harper, frankly, had it at Tennessee, here's how ESPN led the story of her firing at the time. Tennessee parted ways with Harper on Monday after 5 seasons, opting to make a change to try to reinvigorate a program that has not played for a national championship since the late Pat Summitt retired. Well, it is true that Harper never got past the Sweet 16. Her successor, Holly Warlick, also never made it to a Final Four either. So Tennessee is frankly still searching to get back to their once great heights when they were battling back and forth with Connecticut seemingly every season. Well, now these days, obviously South Carolina has surpassed Tennessee, and the Volunteers have just never gotten back to those heights. It's sort of reminiscent of Nebraska football a little bit, and other situations where just holding on to the glory of the past can almost be like a millstone around the neck of the new person. And here's the thing with Kellie Harper. Despite the fact that she's still in her 40s, she's had about 20 years of experience as a coach. In fact, when she was about, let's see, what age would she have been here? About 26, is that right? Yeah, she would have been about 26 years old when she took over as Western Carolina's head coach about 20 years ago now. Then she, after a few years, successful years there, took over at North Carolina State. Now, of course, everybody knows Harper was not the immediate successor to Pat Summitt, but after Holly Warlick, as I just brought up. But what a lot of people forget is that after NC State, Harper was essentially the successor to Kay Yow as well, another legendary coach, maybe not known in quite the same terms as Pat Summitt, maybe not quite to that status, but I don't know, maybe let's say she's the Roy Williams to, Nick Saban is up here, and I don't know what analogy actually works here. Maybe she's the Norm Stewart to, say, a Adolph Rupp or something like that. I don't know what the perfect analogy here is, but regardless, Kay Yow is a tough person to follow as well, another tough act to follow. And while it didn't work out for Kellie Harper, that is, at North Carolina State, again, that's a really tough place to go. And with all of the experience of Harper, again, she's been about the two toughest situations you could possibly be in. And maybe Western Carolina and Missouri State, a couple of spots where she did have success, you could certainly argue that that's her level. But I would argue that Missouri is a lot closer to Missouri State and Western Carolina's level than I would Tennessee and North Carolina State. Even compared to North Carolina State, Missouri's expectations for women's basketball really aren't even close to that. Again, if Harper does about half of what she did at Tennessee that she did at Missouri, again, Missouri will be very happy with that. Missouri hasn't had that type of success outside of the Sophie Cunningham era ever, quite honestly. So, and the other reason that I have hope here with Kellie Harper, I like the fact that she actually took this past year off after having what was a whirlwind run at Tennessee, basically getting her dream job in 2019. Then COVID hits. Then the transfer portal and NIL and all this stuff. Hey, it hits the men's basketball even harder, of course. But believe me, this has changed a lot in women's basketball as well. She's gone through all of this. She's seen tournaments. She's been in big-time recruiting battles for the biggest types of players in that sport. And she took a year off now from having experienced all that. And yet, after taking a year off, she didn't go, whew, the heck with this. I'm glad I got out of that nonsense, because I'm sure Kellie Harper's got a decent amount of money socked away in her bank account. She doesn't necessarily need this. What I like is that she jumped back into the fire with both feet, into the SEC, into a state that she's somewhat familiar with. Again, the former Missouri State coach for about 6 seasons as well. So, Kellie Harper, I'm cautiously optimistic here. I really do understand the naysayers. At the same time, I think her 2 spots before this at NC State and Tennessee, again, it's sort of like following Nick Saban or Tom Osborne or Mike Krzyzewski. Hey, good for John Shire. Seems to be working out for him so far. But for the most part, look at Hubert Davis. How's it going at North Carolina? Hey, he won one game in Dayton. Good for him. I don't know that that's gotten him completely off the hot seat. Believe me, I'm old enough to remember the post-Dean Smith era with Bill Guthridge and who was the Kansas assistant who went there for a while? Matt Daughtery, right? That was the name. And then I'm just saying, it's not a guarantee, even if you're North Carolina basketball, that everything's going to go perfectly. They had to pluck Roy Williams from Kansas to turn that whole thing around. Usually that stuff doesn't work out so easily. So I would say Kellie Harper has learned a lot from those two experiences, and really, she's got a resume that Missouri fans should be excited about. I don't think Missouri women's basketball fans have any right to be incredibly picky here. I think Harper's a great candidate. If you liked Molly Miller and thought she was a big-time candidate, well, I did too. The problem is I'm not sure how interested she was in Missouri. It seemed like with her going from Grand Canyon to Arizona State, it seemed like she didn't want to move her family all the way across the country practically to go to, well, a place that historically hasn't supported women's basketball full-throatedly. So Kellie Harper, bottom line, I'm cautiously optimistic here. And finally, I'm running up against the clock here, so I'll probably do a little bit more on this tomorrow. But just quickly here, I want to ask you all, are you bored by this Sweet 16? Is this the most boring Sweet 16, at least in recent memory? Because quite honestly, when the Cinderella team is John Calipari, who am I supposed to be excited about? The other upsets outside of the 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds are, well, the Hogs, 6-seeded Ole Miss, and 5-seeded Michigan. I just, if I'm a casual fan, who am I getting behind here? I just don't get it. Obviously, if my team is still in it, fantastic. If my team has been knocked out of it, who am I as a Missouri fan, for example, supposed to root for here? You tell me. I'll get more into that topic probably on tomorrow's show. And, of course, going to have a lot on the basketball transfer portal coming up for you here in the next week or so. So all you everydayers, it's going to be a good time to be an everydayer, as it always is. So I'll see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Mizzou.